I'd like to welcome everyone to the impact of card check legislation on the retail industry conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. Callers are reminded that this equity research conference call is strictly for invitees only. No person from Bank of America Securities Capital Markets, investment banking, or any member of the media may be on this call. In addition, if this call relates to investor education in connection with a securities offering, representatives of the issuer are also prohibited from dialing into this call. The material discussed on this call is copyrighted material property and cannot be reproduced or rebroadcast without authorized written permission from Bank of America Securities. I will now turn the call over to Mr. David Strasser, who will proceed with any relevant disclosures and then the prepared remarks.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a quick disclosure. Since Bernie Marcus is affiliated with Home Depot, we have to read this at the beginning. That Home Depot is a Bank of America securities investment banking client. Although Home Depot and the subsidiary is under affiliates or has been a client of BAS in the past 12 months, and during this period, BAS has performed non-security services for this company, its subsidiaries and or affiliates, and has received compensation for those services. Thank you. Now let me turn it over. Today, the discussion today is about an issue which we sent a lot of information out. We published a report this morning on H.R. 800, otherwise known as card check legislation, which is something, the reason we decided to do this is that talking to retailers, both private and public, it just has become such a bigger issue where the market does not seem to have as much of an interest or understanding in this as it is among the retailers, and felt it was a very important thing to talk about. And I was in a hotel room, it was sometime over the summer, and where there was an article, an op-ed piece that I read, from the Wall Street Journal by Bernie Marcus talking about this issue in a very passionate way, and hearing that and then talking to other retailers made me realize it was time to do some work because this must be a very big issue. In essence, and I'm sure Bernie will probably do a better job of describing it, is it changes the way that unions can be certified at a company. There's no longer a need for a silent vote, and instead, once 51% or 50% of people sign on, a union is automatically certified from the way that I see it. And we've talked about this in the context of retailers, but I think it goes well beyond retail. I think you can look at the hotel industry, the healthcare industry, and a lot of other different industries, and it will have an impact on that as well. And I'm sure Bernie can talk about that a little bit as well. One of the things we think that will happen initially if this would pass would be that there would be a protracted litigation on the part of companies like a Walmart or so on that would try and delay it for some period of time. But I think what's even interesting, even talking to companies that are currently unionized, even some of them are a little skeptical and nervous about what would happen here, and about what the long-term impact would be to their businesses. Companies such as the supermarket industry. And the reason that the timing of this call is now is that there is definitely a difference in opinion on this issue between the two presidential candidates. And in our report, we actually put in their own words comments that they've made on this from both John McCain and Barack Obama. Barack Obama, more for this and a part of his campaign, and John McCain against it. Just before I introduce Bernie, I just want to thank Sarang Vora, who did a lot of work on our team on this issue as well, and did a lot of this research as well. And now it gives me great pleasure. We have three people on the call today. One is Bernie Marcus, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction. Most of you know him, founder, former chairman of Home Depot, and subsequent to leaving Home Depot, just a whole ton of things that he has done through his foundation, the Marcus Foundation, whether it's the Georgia Aquarium, Jewish causes, children, medical research, free enterprise in the community, just a whole ton of things. It seems that subsequent to leaving, he hasn't really slowed down much at all. Additionally, we have Stephen Handler, who is the Marcus Foundation's Director of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship. where in this capacity he directs the foundation's activities in the areas of free enterprise, entrepreneurship, energy security, higher education, and liability reform. He's been with the Marcus Foundation since 2007 after 27 years with Chrysler. And lastly, also on the call is Richard Berman, the president of the Berman Company, a DC-based public affairs firm specializing in research, communications, and creative advertising. He's also founded several nonprofit organizations known for facts-based research and aggressive communications campaigns. That's what it says on the biography. That's his words, not mine. Anyway, at this point, I'm very happy to turn it over to Bernie to talk about something I know he feels pretty passionate about.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that I know a lot of you out there. I'm an old broken-down retailer, so just accept the fact that I'm a philanthropist today. I really have no ties to any company. I'm not on the board of Home Depot, although I'm a board member emeritus. I haven't been to a board meeting. I'm not privy to any of their information. I'm a total outsider and not an insider. Although I must tell you, I still go to the stores and send plenty of emails to Frank Blake every time I see something, and fortunately, he listens to most of the things I say. So, but I really have no inside information on Home Depot except as being a customer. Let me tell you why I'm involved with this. I'm a product of people who came to this country. My parents were Russian immigrants, spoke no English when they got here, and this was the Golden Land. We lived in a tenement in Newark. Now, a lot of you know the story. It was a 4-story walk-up tenement with cockroaches and all those kind of things. But to us, it was paradise. And to me, this country has been one of the greatest things that's ever happened in my life. I only thank God that I was born here rather than other places in the world. And being able to achieve what I've achieved in this world could only happen through the free enterprise. System. And to me, I look back and I know I could be living on a 350-foot boat out in the Mediterranean somewhere. But the truth is, through my Jewish heritage, I just believe I have to give back. I mean, God has been good enough to me, and I have to give back. This bill may be one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. It's incredible to me that anybody could have the chutzpah to try to pass this bill in this election year, especially when we have an economy that is a disaster, a total, absolute disaster. Surviving this economy is going to be difficult for anybody. This bill doesn't only affect retailers, it affects every business in the United States. Every single business in the United States. And in essence, let me go further, David, than you talked about it, okay? Let me give you the essence of this thing. The secret ballot is gone, which means that in the past, if you tried to organize, what you would do is you would collect the card checks, then you would go to NLRB, then it would call for an election. At that point, the employer had the right to discuss issues with the employees. By the way, any discussions would have to be in premises, but they would be paid for it. And if they didn't want to appear, they didn't have to appear. Number two, he could never make any promises or he could never make any threats. He was totally muffled with what he could say. All he could talk about is the environment, what a union represents, what it might mean for them. He could only talk in facts. The union can make any kind of promises during this period of time, by the way. They could promise to triple their salaries, give them 7 weeks vacation. It didn't make any difference. They're not held to any standard whatsoever. So it was a one-way street to start with. But at the end of the game, the employee had the right to go into a booth and vote by secret ballot. That was the key. He would listen to both sides, and believe me, they would meet him at his home. They would meet him where he eats lunch. They would meet him everywhere, and they would try to basically intimidate him to vote for the union. But he had the secret ballot, and because of the secret ballot today, we have only 7% of the private sector is unionized, which means that most people don't want it. They just don't want it for whatever reason. If people want a union, they should have it because it means that the employer was stupid enough not to treat them the way he should be treating them. Now, under the new rule, so in other words, what has happened, you have a 7%, and our economy has grown dramatically. We see companies like Daimler-Benz, Toyota, we see Hyundai. Here in Georgia, where Kia is going to open a factory. Why did they come here? They came here because they know that if they treat employees right, if they take care of their benefits, if they take care of all of the issues that people want, that they can have a good workforce, and the work rules will not kill them. The work rules, remember what I said, that's the killer, the work rules, okay? So they don't want to end up being like General Motors or Chrysler or Ford. And so they're not, and they're thriving, and they're producing cars, and maybe when people start buying cars again, these factories will be running at full core. Now what is going to happen is that they will collect 50% plus one card. The day they collect that, you are now unionized. From this point on, the employer has no rights. He cannot talk to the employees. He cannot discuss it with the employees. And by the way, the employees have no votes either. From this point on, it's the union and it's the employer. And they go into a negotiation at the end of 120 days if they don't sign a contract. If they do not sign a contract at the end of 120 days, and why would the union want to sign a contract? They're going to ask for the moon. They're going to ask for wages and work rules and all kinds of stuff because they know that at the end of that period, a government arbitrator, not a moderator, an arbitrator will come in and unilaterally set the pay scales, the work rules, everything else that happens. Now, in other words, it takes away from the employer any rights whatsoever. He's dead in the water. And to collect 50% cards is not a difficult thing. There's all kinds of intimidation. There are thousands upon thousands and thousands of cases. Now, what do I object to? Number one, I object to the fact that the employer loses all rights. He loses all control over his HR function. He basically is going to take the most important part of his business and give it away to people who don't have a clue about his business. And the third one is the secret ballot. My God, how could anybody even think about doing away with the secret ballot? George McGovern had an article in the Wall Street Journal. He's ashamed. He's ashamed of his organization. He's ashamed of his party for what they're doing. And by the way, he's done commercials on this. He is so upset by this. How could the Democratic Party take away when, in fact, the Democratic Party, we have a letter from George Miller, who is the head of the what is that committee? It's the Labor Committee, a letter that he wrote in 2001 to the Mexican government telling them that they must have secret ballots, that if without secret ballots, it can't be a free and open society. Well, so this is the most hypocritical thing that's ever come down the pike. And what is this going to do for America? Let me tell you, in the long run, for retail companies, it's going to have a dramatic effect. And I agree with you, David. What's going to happen? Walmart's not going to sit down. They're going to lay down. They're going to fight this, all the way through to a Supreme Court, which will be if there's a Democratic Congress, if there's a Democratic Senate that can stop a filibuster, and a Democratic president. And by the way, Obama not only said this is the first piece of legislation he's going to sign, he promised that this will be the first piece of legislation to sign because he's a co-sponsor on the bill. So this is a lose-lose. And in today's economy, with this country reeling, and will be reeling for the next year or two or three, this will have an impact of telling companies like Toyota, anybody who wants to invest in this country, to stay the hell out. You look at France, and I will promise you that the state of Georgia had more money, more capital invested in it than all of France did in the last year. Why? Because it's a right-to-work state. Oh, by the way, those of you who don't know it, and probably you don't know it, there's now a bill in Congress. This is a bill with a name on it and a number on it that will take away the ability of right-to-work states to be right-to-work states. I don't even want to tell you about the third one because it'll be too upsetting to you. But this bill will circulate, and this bill, by the way, will pass with this new Congress. And if the Republicans don't have a veto power, if we don't have a Republican president, this bill will be law next year, early next year. This will be the first bill that'll be out there. Now, what effect it's going to have on companies? Well, I would say that anybody who manufactures a product or has a service that can be done outside the country should move it out as quickly as possible. I think that we'll lose Toyota. I think we'll lose Daimler-Benz. These countries.